Walking without skin. Managing adversity with vulnerability.
Pain is wrong. Every inch of my heart like an open wound. I can't go on. I'll drown if I don't stop the bleeding soon.
When we have buried emotions, in order to move away from abusive relationships or negative, toxic relationships, we have to sit and unbury those emotions and really hold them and feel them and move out of them and accept them as part of ourselves.
Where can I find some protection to prevent this ongoing infection?
You are listening to Walking Without Skin, the show where we encourage our guests to be vulnerable, to share their voices with authenticity, to tell their stories from the heart. We will talk about hope and recovery, about overcoming loss, changes, challenges, and adversities. We will walk without skin.
How will I know when it's safer? When every step feels like sandpaper. I'm walking without skin. I'm walking without skin.
And here is your host, Lois Wagner.
Hi, I am Lois, your friend for forgiveness and the creator of Walking Without Skin. I have a book with the same title, Walking Without Skin. And today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Susan Ball. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Lois.
Hi, it's good to see you again. We have had the opportunity to speak before.
Yes, we have. It's been a while, though. It's been a while, but it's really good to see your face.
And you too. I'm glad you are well. So Susan Ball is an abuse recovery expert, disruption, lived experience speaker, and a best-selling author. But before we get into what you do, Susan, can you tell me what you understand by the term walking without skin?
For me, it is a very, to me, it conjures up a lot of pain. That's what it conjures up for me. And that it is breaking through into your authenticity. There's this moment of feeling very naked and very vulnerable. That's what it means to me. It's that time when you, like for me, when I was in recovery, where I had to step out and be very vulnerable and very naked to the world until I found myself. That's what it means to me.
Great, thank you very much. So Susan is on a mission empowering women to rise up, show up, free their voices, and move from the victim space to the courageous and healing space. What led you to do this work? What prompted you to start this journey that you are on?
4 abusive relationships, Lois. Number 4 tried to kill me. It was a night that I will probably never forget. He strangled me to blacking out and I ran for my life. And after that happened, I had 2 little girls. I was drinking and doing a lot of drugs. I was doing all of that to numb the pain. I had all of these bad relationships. And one evening, because I lived in a furnace room, literally right beside the furnace. That was the only person who would give me shelter. And I lived there. And one night, I was very, I have to be honest and vulnerable, that I was very drunk. And this little voice came in my head that said, well, Susan, who's the common denominator in all these relationships? And I was like, well, you just get away from me because we're not going down that path. I'm going to drink and I'm going to blame everybody else. And I'm going to, live in my lonely apartment at the end of the victimhood. I was very much in that frame of mind. And I recognized over time, as my life got worse and worse and worse, Lois, that I wasn't healing. I wasn't looking at my relationships. I wasn't looking at my childhood. I wasn't looking at my unhealthy patterns. I wasn't doing any of that. I was just, what would you call it? Numbing, I guess, just giving up on life. And I had a profound experience with an old friend who helped me see that living as a victim was not a healthy place to be, and it was not going to move me forward into healthy relationships, healthy lifestyle, all of that kind of stuff. And although I fought it really hard, I really wanted to hang on. I really thought that living in the victim space was protective for me. It was a place that I felt comfortable. It was familiar. I liked it there. It was really scary to step out of that and face myself in a courageous, graceful, vulnerable way and look back and at my patterns and say, wow, the reason that I kept going after these toxic, abusive relationships was because in my childhood, that pattern became familiar. It was comfortable to me. I didn't understand kindness and decency and all of that kind of, I didn't understand that. So I went to the familiar space, and that's what started the true deep healing for me.
So what did you do? How did you come out of it?
I went there. I went for the longest time in my life. I felt that I had, I had dealt with my childhood, my abusive childhood. I really felt like, oh, that was no problem. That's over. That's not part of my adult life. And through my own experience, I sat down and I went there and I said, Susan, it's time for you to really look back at your childhood and excavate these emotions that you have been burying for a long time. And it was tough. I went to 26 schools from the age of 5 to 14. 26, because my mother was constantly leaving, going, moving me here, shoving me over there, doing all of that. Prior to my mother and father getting a divorce, there was violence in the home. There was a lot of violence, so I hid a lot. I was terrified. My sisters were much older. They kind of tossed me around. My one sister was physically violent with me from the time I was a little girl, including holding me over a balcony by my ankles. So all of those instances in my childhood, and my mother was very emotionally unavailable, completely emotionally unavailable, and would constantly tell me how I was a late in life baby that she had never planned and how I basically screwed up her life. The other 4 didn't, but I did. There was that being the baby. I had never dealt with that. I had never put that out there and held it in my hands and said, wow, that's painful. That hurt. Never. I buried it. So I sat back. And this is not to blame or shame or make your parents feel guilty for what they did. As a matter of fact, when I did all my healing work, Lois, I had a better and more loving and compassionate relationship with both of my parents after that. Not so much my sisters, but my parents. I understood where they came from. But to get to know me and to be able to say, okay, here's the physical abuse that went on between my mother and father. And here's the physical abuse in my relationships. I could see that it was familiar. It was comfortable. It wasn't foreign to me. Somebody who came from a loving home where that didn't happen, if somebody laid a hand on them, they would say, whoa, that's not for me on walking away. For me, it was like, oh yeah, okay, well, this happens in marriages. This happens in relationships. The sense of someone being mean to me and calling me names. I was called names all of my life. My sisters called me spoiled and selfish and a bitch and a this and a that. And so when people called me that, that was also familiar. So it was going back there and letting those emotions out. And it was scary and it was difficult. And there was times when I sat in so much pain, Lois, that I didn't know what to do with it. But I stopped drinking and I stopped doing drugs and I stopped numbing it. And one of the things that I'm so emphatic about is that when we have buried emotions, in order to move away from abusive relationships or negative, toxic relationships, we have to sit and unbury those emotions and really hold them and feel them and move out of them and accept them as part of ourselves. Like, I grew up in a situation where emotions were negative. You weren't allowed to be angry. You weren't allowed to be sad, suck it up, all of that kind of stuff. So dealing with all of that at the end of the day was really difficult. It was foreign to me, really foreign to me.
Did you have any help to deal with those emotions?
Not in the beginning, but as time went on and it became a little bit overwhelming, I sought out counselor. And I have to say this because people are listening and I want them to know, interview your counselors. Make sure you're comfortable with them, that they understand where you're coming from, and more importantly, what you want to achieve, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times they have their own perception of what it is you need to achieve, not what it is you want to achieve. So I learned that I had to be more of a business transaction and not just take it, because a lot of counselors that I went to were not helpful. But I finally found someone where I went in and I said, look, I had a lot of abuse growing up that I have not dealt with. And she was fabulous. She helped me write it out, get in touch with it, learn about my emotions, which was a big deal because I didn't know what they were. Put it where it belonged as a reference point to help me get grounded in my present with my emotions, but to more importantly, focus on my future in a very positive way.
So you dealt with your childhood trauma. What about your trauma from your abusive relationships?
Oh, I dealt with all of that at the same time too, but I think the trauma with my abusive relationships, the fact that I could draw the connection between my childhood and my acceptance of abuse in adult relationships was how I put that in the correct perspective. The other thing that I really focused on was learning about red flags and where the person, the abuser, gave me clues into who they really were that I chose to ignore because I was so desperate for love and all of that. That was my dealing with that trauma. It was like, okay. And another thing, now, people who are listening, people who are in this situation, I don't know if it was true for you, Lois, but growing up, no one spoke to me about boundaries. No one. When people would say to me, what are your boundaries? I go, what are you talking about? What does that mean? What's a boundary?
Yeah, our generation, we certainly didn't have that opportunity to work with boundaries. And it's wonderful to see that so many of the youngsters are being taught to discover, to identify, and to share their boundaries, which is a fantastic movement. Can you give us an example of a red flag?
Well, yes. I can go. So my key trauma from childhood that kept coming up in my adult relationships was fear of abandonment and not feeling worthy of love. So those were my two main issues. Unhealed trauma, unhealed childhood wound, if you want to put it that way. And so when I look back at my relationships, the red flags were there. My very first long-term relationship, he was very narcissistic, very emotional, very mentally abusive, would do physical abuse, not in the sense of attacking me, but pushing me against a wall and punching the wall next to your face. So you got that sense that next time it'll be you. But the red flag that was there all the time was this one. And now that I look back at it, I go, oh my God. So he would ask me to meet him somewhere in town for dinner or whatever we were doing. Be there at 7:00. Now, at the time I took transit, public transit. We all know that those can be delayed or late or whatever. And I would arrive 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes late. And he would do this. I can see how you can get 7:15 and 7:00 confused. And then he would walk away. Now that's abusive, because when you are like I was, and so terrified of being abandoned and left again, I would go completely into, I got to do better. I got to make him happy. I got to get there on time. I've got to do this thing. All of it would pour into me, and I would work harder and harder and harder on my hamster wheel to get him to love me. But that was a red flag. Now, if somebody said that to me, I would smile and say, yep, that's the time it is now. Are we carrying on, or what are we doing? Like, I wouldn't accept that at all. Another red flag is the things that they say. They are very good. Abusers are very good at mining you for information that they can use. So they will spend an awful lot of time in the beginning learning about you. And they will say things. So, for example, if I said to someone, oh, my last relationship, he was very abusive, he was physically abusive, and so on and so forth, they will say to you, I will never do that to you. That is just horrible. I would never do that to you. I would never call you names. You can trust me, baby. It will never happen. So you immediately feel this sense of attachment, anxious attachment, not secure attachment, anxious attachment. You think, okay, this is the one. He understands. He heard me. He's not going to do this to me. Or they will tell you things like, all the women I have met, you are so different. You are so different. I can feel myself falling in love with you. And I know it's too soon, but I can feel myself doing it. If you have abandonment or worthiness issues, that is like, well, that's just a golden apple. You know, this person is loving you without judgment. All of these things are red flags. Red flags are how they treat people, service people especially. How they talk about their exes. This is another big red flag that we tend to ignore. They will go on about how their exes were crazy or this or that or all of these things. And that's actually a red flag, because why are they telling you that? A healthy person will tell you it just simply wasn't the relationship for them. That's it. That's all. No blaming the other person. So we need to look out for those things in a way that is healthy for us. So if something comes up, you can actually say, and this is where boundaries and standards come up. If you're out with someone and they say, oh, my ex was crazy, you can say, I'm really uncomfortable with that. I'm really uncomfortable about you speaking about your ex that way. You call it out immediately.
So what do you do to support women to find their fearlessness and to be able to stand up to a narcissist?
I support them to actually look at the things that I have looked at, the connection between childhood and adult relationships, the wound that is creating that connection. So it can be worthiness, abandonment, fear of losing someone, whatever that wound is, whatever that fear is, we look at that and we excavate and we heal all of that. We look at the red flags in their abusive relationships. Which ones did they minimize, rationalize, or completely deny? And we start looking at the truth of what we want, the truth of what we desire, what we need, and what boundaries and standards do they need in their life to get that, to realize that in their future. So it's very much a complete healing, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, a complete from childhood all the way up to what you see in the future.
Can you share a story or an incident of where dealing with one of your clients, it really made an impact on you and maybe even changed the way that you work?
Oh, I've had lots of clients. The women who come to me, they're in various stages of their recovery. But I'll tell you right now, I have a client, and I expressed to her the other day that her abuse, the mental, emotional, physical, sexual abuse that she went through with her partner, is one of the worst cases that I have ever heard of. In fact, I have said to her that she was tortured. She was just brutally tortured from beginning to end. And that her healing journey is very complex. We have to look at it in a very complex way. So the way that I work with her is very different than I would work with someone else because of the deep personal wounding and torture that this woman has been through. This is not, how can I say this? This is not, I don't even want to say average or normal. Hers is so off the charts that I have to develop new ways of working with her. Very compassionate, always in a safe space, always when it gets to be too much for her, we talk about something else, we bring it down to a different level, because I have to be aware all the time of the level of trauma that someone has experienced. And in this particular case, I'm very aware of the level of trauma.
Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody who's starting out to realize that they are with a narcissist partner?
What I would say is observation. Tell yourself the truth, but be observant. Their patterns of behavior are really who they are. So narcissists wear masks. They have masks for you when they want something. They have masks for the outside world. They have masks depending on what they're doing or who they're performing for. But when that mask slides off, that's the real person. So when you're in an abusive relationship with a narcissist and they are gaslighting you or manipulating you.
Just give a definition of gaslighting for those who don't know.
Oh, gaslighting. Gaslighting is that wonderful thing where the narcissist says to you, you go to them and you say, when you did such and such, it hurt me or made me angry. They will completely go into, I never did that. I never said that. You're completely making that up. That's not how it happened at all. So you go, oh, maybe that's not what happened. And they continuously do that to you. They continuously deny what you're saying. Gaslighting turns them into the victim. They need to be the victim of you. So eventually that conversation will digress into, I can't believe you're accusing me of that. That's disgusting that you are saying that I treated you that way. I'm going to go out. I can't deal with this. So you're left standing going, okay, I was pretty sure he said something mean to me. I wanted to bring it up because it hurt me. Now he's left the building, and I'm not sure if that's what that he even said that to me in the first place. That's gaslighting. It's a circular accusation that leaves you feeling that you didn't experience what you experienced in the first place.
So what should a woman do when she has that experience?
I express to women to write these things down. I'm a big believer in writing things down. If someone has hurt you and you know you've been hurt, you know that he has lied to you or cheated on you or called you names, write it down. Write it down. Keep track of these things so that when you are doubting yourself, when you have that moment where the nice mask comes on and he's, love bombing you and he's apologizing, and you think to yourself, oh, there he is, he's apologizing. Watch the behavior, because that mask will go away again. And chart that as well. Oh, today he apologized for all of these things. Now here we go again. Keep track of what is going on. Be honest and truthful. Don't minimize it. Don't rationalize it. Don't deny it by saying, oh, he was tired. Oh, something just happened at work. Don't do that. Write it down truthfully in a journal. And when you are doubting yourself about why you're leaving or after you have left, keep track of that and read it out loud if you have to. Pace around your living room and remind yourself, this is what he did to you. This is what he called you. This is how he spoke to you. And live in that truth.
At what point should she leave, or should she seek outside support?
If you are in an abusive relationship, seeking outside support, first, I'm going to say, if you are in an abusive relationship, the only way out of it is to get out of it. The only way to free yourself from that abusive relationship is to get out of it. The second thing I'm going to say is, if you are with a narcissistic abuser, I know that this happens a lot. Women consider going to couples counseling with their narcissist. Do not. Do not. It's dangerous, and he will become worse. He will also be able to manipulate the counselor. This is a fact, and you can research all of this, and many counselors will tell you the same thing. He will always choose a female counselor, and he will manipulate her just as much as he's manipulating you. You will come out of it feeling worse, and he will have more control over you, because he will say, look, I didn't do anything wrong. You're at fault. So it will escalate. So don't consider that. If you are feeling like you're walking on eggshells, like you're sitting at home and you don't know what mood he's going to be in, you don't know how you're going to fix this, you're constantly feeling you're on a hamster wheel of trying to please and fix and do all of this stuff, it is time for you to do some self-reflection about your relationship. And is it healthy? Are you happy? Are you feeling content and at peace? Do you feel loved? Are you doing all the work? Are you filled with anxiety? Are you filled with emotions you're not allowed to express? These are the things you want to look at, and those are the things that will propel you to leave. And if you have children, your children see you. They see what's going on. They know what's going on. And they will perpetuate the cycle. Sadly, they will perpetuate it. So the sooner that you can get out and get on your healing journey, the better for you and your children.
If you had a billboard on the side of the street, what would you put on that billboard?
What would I put on that billboard? I would say, ladies, if you're in a relationship where you don't have a voice, where you don't have a say, where you are feeling constantly threatened, get out. The days are long, but life is short. It's not worth putting your whole life on hold to fix him, because you can't fix him. Step out and look at you courageously and vulnerably and heal yourself.
That's a lot of words for a billboard.
I know. Can't help myself, Lois.
As you know, I've got a project called Be Brave, which is designed to teach people to not be bullies, to not harass, to not have gender-based violence. And the B stands for boundaries. What does the word brave mean to you?
Brave to me means being, well, loving yourself so completely that you naturally push away bullies and abusers and toxic people in your life. You are brave enough to stand in your authenticity and say, no, 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 and walk away. You can hit the reject button much easier.
Great. You've got a 12 action step to break the cycle. Can you give us one or two of those steps?
Yes, one step is completely, and we all hear this, but the first one is no contact. If you have a toxic person, if you have an abuser in your life, no contact. If you have children, it has to be controlled contact. That's different for the children. But if you are childless and you have a bad relationship, whether it's with your family, an intimate partner, a boss, a neighbor, whoever it is, it's no contact. That means no social media, no texting, no phones, no getting somebody else to peek for you, none of it. It's just doing it and cutting it off. Because being in an abusive relationship, you become addicted to the person, you become addicted to fixing that person, and you need to cut that addiction. One of the other things I would say out of the 12 action steps is the truth bombs, as I call them. We have a tendency when we're in abusive relationships to, as I said, minimize, deny, and rationalize the negative behavior. So I encourage women who are in abusive relationships to write down the truth bombs so that they can read them out loud. He hit me, he cheated, he called me this, and this. He did this, he spent all the money, he left me in debt, he did all of this. Just like that, just boom, 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 boom. No excuses tagged on to the end, no minimization, nothing, just truth bombs. And when you feel yourself saying, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe I should break no contact and talk to him and see if we can work it out, pick it up, read it out loud, stomp around your living room and get back into connection with the truth.
Great advice. How can people reach you, Susan?
I have a website, www.recoveryafterabuse.ca for Canada. That's an important part. And on there, you can find out how to work with me, how to get involved in my monthly support group, how to just reach out to me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all of that good stuff. Oh, and I have a YouTube channel.
Fantastic. Last word of advice or a tip for our listeners.
Love yourself enough to walk away from toxic people, toxic situations, abusive situations. Love yourself that much.
I think that makes a great billboard.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I invite everybody to reach out to Susan. You can reach out to me. I offer a free coaching session where we can discuss your life journey. And I invite everybody out there to fly free.
Thank you for listening to Walking Without Skin. We would love your feedback, opinions, suggestions, and ratings. Please share this podcast far and wide to encourage more people to share their stories with vulnerability and authenticity.
I wanna live. I want